this week is just a pure and perfect example of how broken Congress is. It is broken and it is not working the way it's supposed to. And if you think about all the structural problems in our democracy right now, all of them have their roots in this dysfunctional, broken Congress. Congress is, particularly in the 21st century, is on a level of dysfunction that we have not seen before. Yes, piling on Congress and blaming Congress for things. Mark Twain told jokes about Congress. Johnny Carson did it. Jack Parr did it. So beating up Congress is not new and blaming Congress for everything. But Congress really has changed how it functions. It is not, if you go back and watch Schoolhouse Rock, there are no conference committees that are taken seriously anymore. There's not bipartisan amendments that get taken seriously anymore. There's not these back and forth where committee chairs get to actually write legislation anymore. It's written all in a back room. It's written in the Speaker's office, or it's written in the Oval Office. And this isn't just a Republican thing. We're witnessing, frankly, this is, the same dynamic we're seeing play out right now. This sort of jamming this on party line votes in the Senate and the House. Okay. It's about the same way the Democrats did it with Biden just 3 or 4 years ago when they had full control. And this is how all legislation's been conducted in the 21st century. When one party has control of the White House, House, and Senate, they precariously try to jam legislation in, do so on the partisan effort, try to find compromise between the most liberal member of their party and conservative member of their party, not at all working with the other side. The other side decides to do nothing but gum up the works. We're going to make you read the bill, right? That's a Republican trick that Schumer picked up, and he did it on the Democratic side. So we're going to waste another 16 hours just reading every bit of the bill. And then we're going to write crazy amendments that try to make you vote for or against things that will look terrible in a direct mail piece in your reelections. And, the Republicans did it to the Build Back Better. The Democrats did it to the big, beautiful bill, all these BBBs, right? And, it is what it is. Now, the question is, how did we get here? How did it get this broken? Look, there's a lot of finger pointing, right? That you talk to an old school Democrat and they'll blame the rise of Newt Gingrich and his targeting of Jim Wright, that he partisanized. He took Congress away from being an institution that was a check on the presidency, that was the legislative branch, and instead turned it into a partisan act. And then now old school Republicans will say, oh yeah, the Democrats started it first, and they'll point to an incident in the middle 80s, an Indiana House race, where the Democratic majority just decided to declare a winner in a disputed election, because Congress does have that power. It's not a Secretary of State in a given state. It's actually Congress that is the final adjudicator when it comes to disputed elections having to do with who serves in the U.S. House of Representatives. And the Democrats, just on a party line vote, said, screw it. We don't care what the recount says. We're declaring the Democrat the winner. So here's the thing. They both have dirty hands. Okay. Both parties have weaponized partisanship into the House, have dysfunctionized the place in so many ways. Look, if you actually look at it, right, if you look at all the different things we have issues with in our broken democracy, you have the judiciary broken by the U.S. Senate, right? You have the inability to deal with taxes and with our debt and deficit, with anything having to do with entitlements. Well, that's thanks to the House, right? It is all of this stuff. Are you tired of the presidency having so much power? You can thank Congress for not standing up to the president at all on some of these executive issues. And it is why we're in this situation. This isn't how we're supposed to make legislation. And by the way, you know what's going to happen to about a third of this legislation? The same thing that happened to the Democrats, which is Republicans came in and they've tried to undo as much as they could with Biden, right, on his bill. I promise you, if Democrats get the troika of the House and the Senate and the presidency in 2029, their big bill is going to try to repeal parts of the Trump bill that they think is the most unpopular. And we're going to keep doing this ping-ponging back and forth, which is going to do what? Create more instability in our economy, create more instability about our political system, and make it harder and harder for the rest of the world to know how much can they rely on the United States? You want to know why the dollar's so weak and why there's all these stories you're seeing about a weak dollar? Because the United States doesn't look like the safe haven it once was, right? Our political system is broken. Congress broke it, and we've got to figure out how to fix it. So, how do we fix it? Well, look, I do think there's one of the problems is us, right? We in the media need to look in the mirror. If the public doesn't fully understand how far Congress has drifted from its original design of the founders, Article 1 powers, right? The center of democracy was supposed to be through the legislative branch. That's actually on us in the media, right? We haven't sounded the alarm consistently. We haven't covered Congress like the failing institution that it is. And especially that the newer generations of reporters, many of whom have never seen Congress function any other way. When I first got here, the committee chairs were the powerhouses. And frankly, that was by design, and that was the hope. That was why the 20th century version of Congress got a lot of stuff done in various ways. And it didn't matter which party was in charge, but a lot of it got done because committee chairs were empowered. And then that was something first, Newt Gingrich disempowered committee chairs, and then the Democrats responded in the same way. All of it has been about strengthening the two or three leaders at the top and weakening the committee chairs at the bottom. So one of the ways, if we want to fix this, is we've got to all do a better job of educating the public on how it's broken and why and how far we went away from the original intent of the founders. Because I do believe this. You can say something is broken, but if you offer people something new, they're going to be a little nervous about it. But if you ground it in the fact that, hey, we used to do it this way, you actually have a better shot, right? When I hear anybody talk about original intent, right? You'll hear that in some legal debates about original intent of the Constitution or original intent of the founders. Well, the original intent was for Congress to function far differently than it functions today. So how do we fix it? Well, I'm going to get back on my hobby horse. I don't think the two-party system can do it alone. That's the problem here, right? We've got this sort of, both parties, or that the parties are too entrenched, or too beholden to their own interest groups. And you look at what the Republicans have done. Their voters and their donors don't have the same priorities. And yet they created a bill that tried to deal with both. Oh, we'll try this, no taxes on tips over here, but get these huge tax breaks over here. We'll tell them we're not going to cut Medicaid, but we're going to try to cut Medicaid. But as Mitch McConnell said, they'll get over it. Will they? We'll find out in 2026. And I don't know if the answer is a third party. I mean, do I think it should be? Sure, but we've got this duopoly of ballot access issues. But there is a potential model, and it sort of involves perhaps soft partisans becoming hardcore independents, right? Lisa Murkowski actually taking her rhetoric and putting it into action, if you will. Imagine 6 to 8 senators and 20 to 25 House members who behave more as independents and institutionalists and not as partisan hacks for either Team Blue or Team Red. And they behave where people who refuse to empower leaders unless they commit to certain reforms, commit to certain institutional reforms, whether it's forcing conference committees so that, don't go around the filibuster. Actually let legislation be filibustered and force the filibuster to be a talking filibuster, right? You can do both things at the same time. That group could swing real power. They could demand more accountability, and they could force both parties to the table, especially if this movement was big enough where it prevented, where whichever side they decide to go with, it would put that side in power, right? We've actually seen hints of it during the Democrats back and forth, right? Manchin, Sinema, they were able to at least force some change when they withheld their votes for a brief period of time. Murkowski and Rand Paul and Ron Johnson kind of sort of did the same thing. So if 10 of them got together and actually put the institution before their political parties, I know that's a lot to ask, I think you'd have different behaviors and you would have a longer process here. I mean, this deadline is just Donald Trump being impatient, right? Donald Trump doesn't have the attention span to have to deal with this legislation for as long as Joe Biden had to. Remember, Joe Biden's Build Back Better, this got stretched out. They wanted to get it done by the summer. Then they wanted to get it done by the fall. And then it just kept punting and punting and punting. And, he was playing a little more soft diplomat in trying to get everybody on board. Trump is a sledgehammer when it comes to this stuff, and he gets bored very quickly, and he wants to move on. So he wants to hurry up and sign this bill, regardless of whether it's an effective bill or not. But he wants to be able to say, "I'm done. Here it is, and good luck, America." But the fact is, this should take longer. This should take the rest of the calendar year if Congress actually cared about the impact of what the small things of this bill would look like. But if you could get that, if you get these, and whether it's Angus King, these so-called independents, if they actually behaved as independents, maybe that's what would work. But here's the reality: our democracy is structurally broken. And we can't fix it until Congress itself gets fixed, because all of the problems of this democracy are derivative of congressional decisions. Okay. And until Congress becomes an institution rather than a stage for partisanship, we're going to continue down this road of dysfunctional, broken politics. And what happens is we take where we are right now, which is we're bordering on a kleptocracy, where pay for play is everything. Right. And this bill is pretty emblematic of that. And this next stage after kleptocracy is full on authoritarianism. And we're in the kleptocracy stage of this. And the only way we can pull it back is if we restore the institution of Congress. Because whatever the issue is, if you care about this polarized judiciary and the fact that the rule of law is seen more through political lenses than through the Constitution, blame Congress. If you're upset that the debt is out of control and is potentially putting us on a path to catastrophic economic conditions in a decade, blame Congress. If you think our campaign finance reform system is essentially beyond broken, this pay-for-play system is only creating a bigger problem with our debt, let alone corruption in plain sight, once again, blame Congress. You don't like the climate policy. You feel as if this Congress isn't focusing on that enough. Again, blame Congress. Congress created the mess, and only Congress can clean it up. It's the first place we have to go to reform. I think we need to double the size of Congress, but I don't think anybody wants to double the size of Congress and make it more representative of the people if we don't have a functional institution and guardrails back at it. But, Mike Johnson, I don't think he has any clue that the Speaker of the House is supposed to be the head of the legislative branch first and a partisan second. But he's never seen Congress function any differently. We've been functioning as this sort of quasi-parliamentary system in the House, essentially since the rise of Newt Gingrich. And it doesn't work in the system we're at. And all it's done is created a more powerful presidency that's been harder to hold to account, a partisan judiciary that has people not believing that essentially the rule of law is enforced through partisan lenses. And we can't seem to tackle the real problems that we have to tackle because of what I would call we so prioritize trying to keep the power that you have that you're afraid of actually risking power to get something done. Right? Josh Hawley is afraid of risking his political career to do what he believed would be the right thing. And as long as we're in a system where, here's the thing, from just a pure selfish perspective, his calculus is right. If he goes against Donald Trump, ask Jeff Flake how that works. Ask Bob Corker how that works. Ask Tom Tillis how that's working.